Howdy, clarinetophiles. In this episode, we're going to be talking about playing the high register. And I'm going to do a little experimenting here, a little something different than I normally do. I'm going to be trying to use the same microphone that I speak with as also a recording microphone just to facilitate this. I've gotten some comments and some letters from customers and various people about how to play the high register. And I thought that this might be a good time to talk about the very things that we need to successfully navigate the high register. So I'm going to go point by point as to the things I think that are very, very important about the high register, and I may try to demonstrate a few of them on the clarinet. Let me get my cap on here so the reed doesn't dry out while that I am talking. Well, in order to get the high register to work, of course, good tone production on a clarinet requires good habits applied all the time. But for what applies generally to the clarinet, it applies a fortiori to the altissimo, or the third register of the clarinet. In other words, everything has to be at its perfections, not just in the way you play, but also in your equipment as well. Any flaws in the equipment is going to show up. They're going to show up in the extremes of the clarinet, which is extreme dynamics and extreme ranges. As we all know, that it's more difficult to play, say, high and soft than it is to play low and loud. So anybody can play low and loud. If you don't believe it, just go right into any beginning band program and listen to the clarinet players there, and they have no trouble playing low and loud. But it takes a really skilled player to play high and soft, but also a player that has really good equipment and knows how to get that good equipment. Okay, so the first thing that, in terms of the things that I need to do, the things I need to do in order to play the third register, first of all, there's a multiplicity of fingerings. Now, some of you may know my book, Clarinet Fingerings. It's annotated with all kinds of fingerings for different parts, different pieces. A lot of recommendations as to where fingerings can be used. But I think it's got about 200 fingerings for the last octave of the clarinet. The clarinet is blessed with a multiplicity of fingerings. And when you're going to play any particular passage in the high register, it really is important for you to experiment, find the very best fingering that's going to fit in the context of that particular phrase. And that takes some patience, takes some time, takes some experimentation. So you want to go through 13 or 14 high E's to find the best one to do the best job at that particular passage. It's a very rewarding kind of research. So I would recommend that you familiarize yourself with a number of fingerings in the upper register. Learn to use them, have them really at your fingertips, no pun intended, so that you can go to them and play the passages that you need to at any given time. The other thing that's very important, and not many people talk about very much, is tongue position. Many people think that in order to play the high register, especially educators, is that you've got to just really crunch down on that reed. You just got to bite and bring that note up to pitch. Well, the fact is, like most players when they play in the high register, let's say with voicing and embouchure, to get the pitch, they're doing like 70% embouchure pressure and 30% with the voicing. And it should just be the opposite. You should your success at playing the high register in terms of your physical control with embouchure and tongue position and stuff, the high register is mainly about 70%. You hear people talk about lipping the sound. I lip the sound. Well, as clarinet players, there's really not a lot of lipping on the clarinet. Maybe you can do that on the saxophone or some other instruments, I don't know, but with the clarinet, if you want to vary the pitch quite a bit, you're going to need to know what to do with tongue position. For instance, I'll give you an example here. I'm going to play a high G, okay? And I'll try to make a few changes, just sustaining the high G. But none of the changes is going to be here in the embouchure, okay? So bear with me here. No one really likes to practice the high register. No one likes to listen to the high register, but it's really quite important if we're going to be successful. So here's my high G. So you can be all over the place in the high register in terms of tuning, shape, color of the sound, and all that, just with the wrong tongue position. And you really have to work to remember where the tongue position is. The tongue position is extremely important because it determines airflow, air speed, and air direction, and a great deal about the air compression. And every one of those aspects of the air affects the sound. So you've got to know where that G is. Now, in my Educator's Guide to the Clarinet, I've got a section I call Honks and Squeaks, where I recommend memorizing or learning to know where the tongue position should be for each of these registers by simply playing overtones. Like, for instance, I'm going to just play low B flat, but I'm going to produce, and you'll notice it's not going to be embouchure. I'm trying to get a good close-up of the embouchure. I'm going to play low B flat here, but I'm going to try to produce a number of pitches out of it, just with the fingering in low B flat. So I'm able to pick out all those pitches just by fingering the low note. I know the low B flat, and I know the D, and I know the F. And I can play them all without the register key and without the proper fingerings there, because I know where the airflow belongs and the tongue position belongs in order to produce those notes as overtones on the clarinet. So those things you need to practice too, so that the fingerings, it's not a typewriter. Just because you have the fingering doesn't mean it's going to come out. The fingerings are they facilitate the note coming out, having the correct fingering, but you have to do the right things with airflow and tongue position to get the optimum qualities out of those high notes. So okay, now that I've offended everybody with the high register and playing honks and squeaks, let's go on and talk about the other thing, one of the other things that we need, and that is the reed.